Hello and welcome to Nothing Zilch Nada. So sorry about the break. We will explain, but first let's go with introductions, starting to the man to my right.
Hi, I'm Jacob Green.
Nothing else, just hi, I'm Jacob Green.
What else do you want me to say? We haven't really gone to...
Like something descriptive.
Okay.
Like the saxiest man alive. Sax, right? I said sax.
Yeah, yes. Musician and teacher.
Okay. Leave it all for me then. Alright. Hi, I'm Mr. Xavier Dean. Man, this is hard. Teacher, sandwich artist, and disc golfer.
Oh, and I'm a package handler, too.
No one wants to hear about you. I can't even finish that.
Oh my gosh. You know that's not what I mean, right?
Oh, I get it. That's why you have so many singles.
Oh my gosh.
Alright, so anyway, you might be wondering why we took a break. Well, end of October and beginning of November was a rough time for my mental health. And in order to help me with that, I did have to take a break. Which, coincidentally, did help Jake with his new job, with everything else going on in his life.
Both of us were just busy in general with our personal stuff. Although we should preface this by saying that we should do a better job when it comes to letting our viewers know when we're going to break off. Just sending like a simple message through our YouTube page or email and whatnot.
Yeah.
We haven't really done something like an email subscription yet.
We have not. I've been trying to figure out how specifically to do that.
Yeah.
I do know, like, we have an email that we're using for this.
Yeah, we'll get to it when we get to it.
We'll get there when we get there.
Anyways,
it may be something for next year.
Yeah.
I mean, like, beginning of next year.
Yeah. Preface this by saying that, like, both of us were just busy and we just kind of needed to break away from the podcast for a while. Although, I don't know about you, but I kind of miss doing it a little bit.
I did miss doing it. But, I do want to say, if you're ever feeling overwhelmed, stressed, it is alright to take a break for mental health purposes or physical health purposes. I mean, come on. Look at how sick this guy is. He's so thin. Makes you wonder what he does.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if you count diabetes as one of those sicknesses, but like...
So, anyway, like I said, just wanted to preface, your mental health is just as important as ours, and if we are able to take a break for us, you should be allowed to take a break for you.
Yeah. But, despite us, posting that last episode on Halloween, and we haven't really done anything for a month on this podcast, it seems kind of odd that, like, there's a lot of stuff that has happened over the past month.
So much. So much has happened.
So much. And, that kind of brings up the fact that I want to preface this by saying that, no matter what happens, don't be aggressive towards anybody else, no matter what. Unless there is, like, a justifiable reason for it. Mm-hmm. Everyone goes through...
Yeah, that's why Jake doesn't steal my cookies anymore.
When have I ever?
There was that one time.
Yeah, that's right. When I hacked into your computer.
Yeah. By the way, thank you for taking those cookies. They're making my computer slow.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyways, be friendly towards one another.
Mm-hmm.
You know, try not to get into fights with one another unless it's a friendly debate that like what we do on this podcast.
And
you know,
like we said at the beginning of our podcast, that we're gonna preface now. Just because you don't agree with something does not mean the other person's wrong. It doesn't mean you're right. It just means you have a disagreement. And this podcast is supposed to help show that, which I think one of our topics upcoming will go through that.
Yeah. So like for example, he could despise Endgame and I could totally enjoy it. Well,
we did go through that one. We did.
Yeah,
I
we
forgot
did.
about that.
We did go through that.
Oh man, we took too long. I forgot about that.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But you know, but speaking of movies, though, we should probably move into our first topic.
Oh, before we do, I think we'd have to explain something to the audience. Specifically, why we're in the same room.
Oh yeah, I guess both of us forgot to mention that. So
no, I remembered. I was just trying to wait for a good time to mention it.
Yeah. So we're recording in my parents' house right now. Both of us are on Thanksgiving break right now, and we decided that this was a good time to actually record an episode.
Yeah.
But we're actually in my room right now, which beforehand used to be the school room where I would study, and beforehand used to be an apartment building.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know about the apartment part.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah.
See, just because you're friends with someone for your entire life does not mean you can't learn new things about them.
Also, that's the reason why there's a big chalkboard on the back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's part of the school aspect, and also the books that are literally to Xavier's left.
The books that you cannot see because we're recording on a computer, not on a movable camera.
Yeah. Although I think it would be cool for a dream podcast setting if like we could have just like a small miniature library, you know, have comfy chairs, have have
your
our
pipe that blows bubbles.
Oh, yeah.
Gotta go full SpongeBob with that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nope. So for this week, and we'll probably do a couple more as time goes on, we're going to be recording in person. As, you know, we will go back to having it where we're recording away from each other when he goes back to school. But, like I said, for today and in the near future, we are recording together. And then you may notice that the intro does have a cleaner look. I've been tweaking up a little bit of how the intro is looking. I will say there are plans on changing that, or how the intro looks. Plan on changing how the outro looks. Anything you want to add about how the intro and outros sound?
Well, I haven't really started work on anything yet, but like I do want to try and refine it at some point.
Yeah. So we got changes on our way. So now we can get to the first topic.
Yeah. So we were just talking about a movie, which was Endgame. That's not what we're talking about because we already talked about it, and I'm sure we could always go back to Marvel movies as a discussion point. But I want to say this was just last week when I saw a trailer for a new movie coming out by DreamWorks, but it's not actually a new movie. It's a
Shrek 5.
If only. But there is a Shrek 5 though.
There is. They're making it. I hope it's the same art style as Puss in Boots: The Last Wish.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I have not seen that movie. I want to, but that art style is so good.
You have not seen it?
No, I want to.
It is phenomenal.
It's Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Guardians 3.
Apparently we get notified if we're still on a call, so. That's another thing. We are changing where we're recording. So. semi-consistent notifications. You're gonna have to work on that one.
Yeah. Anyways, though, but the trailer that DreamWorks released was it's going to be a remake. This is probably the first live action remake that they would do, similar to how Disney would. But it's for How to Train Your Dragon, a movie that came out. When did it come out? I want to say it was like
2012.
I want to say it's close to like 2010.
Hold on.
I want to say. I know How to Train Your Dragon 2 came out in like 2014.
See, this is how bad I am. I am going on to. I can go on IMDb.
Anyways, while you're searching through that, I just saw online a trailer for this movie, and I want to preface this by saying I think the movie looks pretty damn good.
Yes, it does.
Like,
by the way, it is 2010. How dare you?
Okay, so I was right.
Yeah.
So How to Train Your Dragon came out in 2010. I remember when that movie came out, and I still think to this day, very phenomenal movie. I like the whole trilogy.
I still haven't seen the third one.
I think you might like the third one.
I do, but the problem is I like the second one so much as like an end that I have been trying to muster myself into watching the third one.
Yeah. I mean, I do like the second one more than the third one, but the third one has a better conclusion to it.
Okay.
And you'll probably see why if you ever watch the movie.
Okay.
But anyways, so saw the trailer for the remake of the movie. I think there's only one dragon that appears in that trailer, and that is Toothless. Maybe I don't remember. That was the most prominent one that they showed.
Well, yeah, because it's the most prominent dragon in the series.
Well, yeah.
It's to a point where you probably don't even remember the name of Astrid's dragon. Case in point.
You're
Case
right.
in point.
I remember the look of it.
You remember the look, but you don't remember the name.
I used to remember the names because like they had that TV show of How to Train Your Dragon that was on Cartoon Network. Did not look as good as the movie, but it was cool in terms of a lore type thing because they had like different kinds of dragons.
Yes.
Which mean different kinds of dragons becomes like less and less prevalent as you go on through the movies.
Yeah.
But you know, I saw the trailer for the remake, and I thought that one scene with Hiccup and Toothless, you know, when Hiccup gets the first touch Toothless, you know, I thought that scene was pretty done beautifully in the remake. Even though I think it works just as well as when it originally came out.
Yes.
Yeah, but on the other hand, there was another thought that passed through my mind, and that was like, I mean, there were a lot of humans in the trailer, which made sense, but Toothless was the most prominent dragon, and if I'm not mistaken, was the only dragon shown, and that made me wonder a couple of things. Is one, will the rest of the movie look as good as, you know, as Toothless? You know, with the rest of the dragons, because let's be honest, CGI is not cheap.
No, it's not.
And then the second thing that comes to my mind is when is the good opportunity to remake something or to reintroduce something? And I'm not thinking about it now. I think they are releasing something like this at a good time, you know, because like How to Train Your Dragon 3 first came out in 2019, and the remake isn't going to be coming out until 2025.
Right.
So you're
it'd be 6 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
and there's probably not some people that have. This is probably the first thing I want to point out is that I think the good thing when it comes to these remake movies is that you're going to have some people that have probably never seen the original before.
Right.
And you introduce them to a movie like this, and they may like it.
Mm-hmm.
Put an asterisk on that. May like it.
Yeah, put an asterisk like the Thunderbolts. I mean, I agree. I do feel like them remaking How to Train Your Dragon, because the movie that they are fully remaking came out 15 years ago. I do feel like, especially with how prominent How to Train Your Dragon is right now, with, again, their last entry being in 2019, and they're still, or that's the last main entry, because there's been, a couple shorts, a couple things since then for How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah, there's a couple of specials, but they're not necessarily connected to the main story in any way.
No.
I'm pretty sure that they're like canon, in some aspects, but I wouldn't consider it to be must watches for people. Like if people wanted to experience, just the main storyline when it comes to like How to Train Your Dragon, I just tell them to watch the trilogy. You really don't need to watch anything else.
No.
If you want to watch more, then you can watch the shows and you can watch the specials and whatnot. But I don't think they're as prominent or have the same staying power as the movies do.
Right. So what I was going at is, with how recent the last entry is, sure, now might be a good time to introduce a younger audience, but at the same time, it's still, in my opinion, far too recent of a time to reintroduce the same concepts. It would be different if this new live action remake was based more towards the book series, which, by the way, Toothless is not a dragon to ride in the books. He's actually a really small dragon. There's also a book about being a pirate.
There's a lot of like movie or game franchises that are mainly based off of books. The first thing that comes to my mind is like, the Witcher series.
Oh, yes.
That is based off of the books.
Mm-hmm.
And that desperately makes me want to try The Witcher, because I've heard so many good things about The Witcher 3 in particular.
For that, you just gotta toss your coin to The Witcher.
Yeah, but
there's that. And then, actually, something I saw today, there was a thing about how Wicked, the movie that came out recently, that was originally based off of a musical, that was originally based off of a book. I mean, granted, the thing went on to say, hey, if you have kids, do not let the kids read the book, because the book is not...
Yeah, and speaking of Wicked, that was the other thing that came to my mind, because, like, now I have not seen the Wicked movie, and I probably won't end up seeing it, because, like, I watched the musical, and I remember both of us in high school, we went to go see the musical as part of a high school trip, and I remember the
freshman band. Our show was Wicked. We played
the music.
Specifically, it was like No Good Deed, Defying Gravity, No One Mourns the Wicked, and there was one more that I was trying to remember, but I can't. It was like one of our, like, one song that we were playing was a mix of Defying Gravity and one more song. And I don't know if that one's No Good Deed, or if No Good Deed was the last song and there's something else.
I can't remember specifically. Right. I do remember, however, when we watched the musical, that the guy that played Oz the Great and Powerful was the same guy that voiced Professor Oak in the Pokemon anime series.
Well, guess what? Now the guy who plays the Great and Powerful Oz is the guy who says must go faster when he's being chased by a T-Rex.
Yeah, but anyways, well, and it's more than just watching the musical in high school, because, like, I knew the music and knew of the musical at a very young age because my sister would always be playing the music on her like CD player. So like I had those songs in my head, even if I didn't fully understand, what that was. So when we were told in high school that like, oh, our show is gonna be Wicked, I was like, oh, I know this.
And I was like, oh, Wicked what? Wicked good? Wicked bad?
Yeah, yeah. But once I saw the musical, it's one of my favorite musicals.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it would be top 5 per se, but like it is one of my favorites. And again, you're gonna hate me for saying this, but I think it's a better prequel than Oz the Great and Powerful that came out in 2013.
I'm not gonna hate you for that one.
Okay.
I will agree that Wicked is a better prequel.
Yeah.
I do like Oz the Great and Powerful more than Wicked.
Yeah, and
but I will.
Speaking of that prequel, though, I watched The Wizard of Oz growing up. That my sister in particular would like to play that movie. I have not seen it in a good while, but I'm sure if I did, I would have nothing but good things to say about it.
So the funny part about Oz the Great and Powerful, Disney didn't have the rights to the actual Wizard of Oz. So they had to use loopholes just to get that movie made, which is part of the reason why that movie didn't do well. They had to use technicalities.
Yeah. Yeah, but going back to like remakes of like certain properties, I think in a lot of cases there are exceptions to this because like we talk about, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this in a little bit, but like the live action remakes that Disney made, and people were like, oh, that's when they started like remaking movies, and no, it actually goes way earlier than that.
It goes so far back.
Because you think about the movies that were made in the silent era before there was audio, or I should say, audio for voice acting, because there was music and whatnot.
Right.
But those were the first movies that were remade for a much more modern audience, or at least modern when they started releasing that stuff at that time. Yeah, those are the first movies that are remade. And I think if you're talking about movies from the silent era, those are movies that should deserve remakes, because like, again, you don't have people that you don't have the true art of voice acting in there. You have acting, but it's more like pantomiming than anything.
Right.
But when you add voices into the mix, it makes so much more of a difference. It's like, it's like originally when you had like, say, a video game. Let's say it's an RPG, because those are games that have voice acting in them. And they originally did not have voice acting in them. It's just dialogue and text. Like, actually, a good example of that is Final Fantasy VII for the PlayStation 1. That did not have voice acting in there whatsoever. But when they remade the game with the trilogy of the remake games, starting in 2020 and then recently in 2023 or 2024, I can't remember, because there's Final Fantasy Remake, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and then there's going to be another one that's coming out in a couple of years.
Okay.
Basically outstretching the story of Final Fantasy VII and adding new stuff in there. But that has voice acting in there.
Right.
And that makes all of the difference, once you start adding voices to it, and that's when things start to get more critical because it's like, oh, is the voice acting good or is it pitiful?
Mm-hmm.
But those aren't the remakes that people usually talk about, though. The ones that they talk about are, again, stuff like the Disney live action remakes, and that is when things start to get more critical. But again, even then, they were still like remaking movies. I think the first ones that come to my mind are like Godzilla or King Kong. You know, those
were not Disney.
No. I'm not saying those were Disney. I'm saying
I thought you were talking specifically Disney. The first thing that would come to my mind is Flubber.
No.
Because Flubber was a remake of The Absent-Minded Professor.
Yeah, but no, I'm just talking like remakes in general, where it's like, you know, King Kong and Godzilla. Those are movies that get adaptions all the time, and you know, you can't say that. Oh, they're exactly the same. No, there are differences between them.
No, the 2014 Godzilla is so different from the more recent 2020. I want to say 3 Godzilla minus 1.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I guess if we're talking about Disney live action remakes, now it comes to the question of like, when it comes to those types of remakes or even other types of remakes in general that are made in that similar vein, do they deserve the remake treatment, and if so, why?
So I actually get a lot of those videos on TikTok where there's someone making the argument of why something as big as The Lion King or Beauty and the Beast would get a live action remake when some of Disney's smaller properties that didn't really work out well don't. Like, you know, The Black Cauldron or Atlantis.
The Lost Empire.
Yeah.
We were thinking the same thing. Or Treasure Planet. You know, that's a...
I mean, yeah, Treasure Planet's another one that's mentioned. I will say, out of the 3 of those, Treasure Planet is, to me, a little more on the lesser side.
Yeah, I can agree with you on that one.
So,
I do have a fondness for it, though.
right.
But I'm sure I'm pretty sure I know what you're gonna say. But I'm assuming the reason why is because, you know, the reason they make Beauty and the Beast or the Lion King make remakes of those is because they were popular back then.
Oh yeah, that's the reason why.
And they made tons of money.
Right. Well, that plus for films like Mulan or Lady and the Tramp that got remakes, there are a couple problematic things in those.
Yeah. Well, Mulan, I would say that one, I have not seen the movie, but I've heard that one is a real remake because like
that one is by far
because they really adapted some things for better and worse, I should say.
I wouldn't necessarily say worse. I don't know. I personally enjoyed it. I enjoyed the remake of Mulan. For the most part. There were a couple things. But yeah, Disney tends to remake things that were either a little problematic when they were popular. Like, for example, Cinderella. You know, the prince just goes and marries Cinderella without getting a chance to know her. Instead, just going off of shoe size. That's problematic. So now in the remake they made, they actually provide more substance by adding sort of like a relationship between Cinderella and the prince. For them all.
I think in that instance, I would be okay with that for a couple of reasons. One, Cinderella came out like how many years ago before the remake?
I will.
Because it's an
older movie.
It is an older movie, but it's also one I've seen Cinderella, and like that is not a movie I like to go back and watch.
What, you don't like the singing mice?
Well. Again, there isn't really any substance to the story. Like, if you're talking about in terms of art style, it looks gorgeous. Like, it's a really great movie, really great for the era. But I'm not kidding you when I say it. I've watched the original Snow White more times than I've had the original Cinderella.
Speaking of Snow White's Cinderella's art style, what color is Cinderella's dress?
Blue.
No, it's white.
In the original?
In the movie, it's supposed to be white, and then
but it looks blue.
It's white.
And
then they had to touch it up, and the film was so dirty that they had to add a couple things. So Cinderella's dress is white, and if anyone says otherwise, tell them they're wrong.
I'll agree with you. Wanna know why?
Why?
She is wearing a white dress at the end of the movie.
Technicalities.
Yeah, and Snow White. I know that's supposed to be getting a remake.
Mm-hmm. Which I know it's gotten a lot of controversy. Because,
oh yeah.
Well, first off, because the villain, who, by the way, a villain of Snow White is the evil queen, who's going after Snow White because Snow White looks prettier than she does. You have Gal Gadot, famous for Wonder Woman, playing the evil queen. I don't think the evil queen's going to have that problem. Just going to point that out there. Unless Snow White is Rosario Dawson.
Yeah, but I've heard a lot of things going on with that movie, specifically with like the main lead in that movie. But
I realized I completely forgot to accept my disappointment. It's not for a couple days.
Yeah, but yeah, there's that movie that's coming out. But yeah, I guess it's all to say, like, when it comes to Cinderella being remade in that instance where, like, it's been a while since the original movie came out, and it didn't really have that much substance originally, that's a good way to remake that movie, is to add more substance to it. Another good way to remake that movie, and I know you will agree with me on this, is something in the same vein as Maleficent, which you can debate about it not being a remake because it's more or less telling a different side of the story, but it is based off of like the original like Sleeping Beauty movie, which is another movie that I haven't really watched too much. Again, it's got a great art style, but there's just not that much substance there.
Okay.
And Maleficent herself in that movie, while being like one of the most iconic Disney villain designs, doesn't really get that much substance there either. In her movie, however, that's a completely different story. She gets a whole backstory and everything. You get to experience everything from her side of the story, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't love movies where you can look at a different point of view from the hero? I mean, that's basically Rambo First Blood. You can look at it at any side and realize that no one's really in the wrong.
Yeah. But where the remake decision comes to a header and to more controversy is, again, when you remake stuff like Sleeping Beauty, not Sleeping Beauty, Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King. Again, the reason why some of these movies have been made is because, they made money when they first came out, and they
Yes.
were popular. Even movies like Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, they were pretty popular at that time when they first came out, even if they aren't at the same level as like something like The Lion King or
Right.
Sleeping Beauty, which came out, when Disney was fine tuning their animation and art style techniques.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where I kind of disagree with remaking movies like that, unless you really think that those movies could
Mm-hmm.
add more substance, which I don't think you could
Right.
in those movies, because they already had enough substance in them,
Mm-hmm.
and they're already so beloved. There's a reason why that era, those eras of Disney movies, is considered like the Disney Renaissance era.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, you have The Little Mermaid, Pocahontas, Beauty and the Beast, Hercules, The Lion King, Aladdin. No, all of them, for the most part, were like big movies.
Yeah, and again, when you remake movies like that, again, you better have a justifiable reason
Mm-hmm.
as to why you need to remake something.
Right.
Whether it's like adding substance to it, like Cinderella, or adding a different side of the story, like you did for Maleficent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if for Beauty and the Beast, you got to see everything from like the Beast's perspective before Belle came
Mm-hmm.
around?
That would be.
'Cause
I honestly think I would improve Beauty and the Beast a lot more.
I think it would.
But at the same time, here's my view on remakes. Because I love the idea of taking a story that's already made and
Yeah.
changing, or like remaking it, changing it to however it fits. Because that's basically every romance film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every romance is based off of Romeo and Juliet in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter if both of them die at the end, one of them dies at the end, neither of them die at the end.
Or which one's better and worse.
Yeah. Yeah. But like I said, I love the idea of taking things from like an original thing and then remaking it. But there's,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like depending on the time, you have to, like there's stuff that you have to do. For example, let's go all the way back to Snow White, Pinocchio. The movie is released at the beginning of Disney.
Oh man, don't get me started on the Pinocchio remake.
We're not going to talk about the Pinocchio remake because I haven't seen any of the Pinocchio stuff. But I feel like those would be some of the best movies if you were to remake them, because of how long ago they've been made.
Mm-hmm.
I know there are several people these days who haven't actually seen things that far back. And I feel like that's a big factor in all this. You would have to base it off of timing. You can't just say, oh, well, we'll release a film, oh, wait, you just released Jake, pick a film series. Any film series.
Any film series. Avengers.
Anything but Avengers, because I have a separate argument for that one.
Batman.
Anything other than superheroes.
Okay. I'm sorry. Jurassic Park.
I can work with Jurassic Park.
Okay.
I can work with Jurassic. So let's say someone remakes Jurassic Park again, and they make it more related to the book, so it's a R-rated horror, because that's what Jurassic Park was. And then someone, right after watching that, is like, hey, guess what? We can remake that right now and have it be relevant. So then you get someone else remaking it. That then is too close together. You already have a brand new Jurassic Park, but while you're still settling in with this one, there's a brand new one coming out, and that one's going to be critiqued a lot more because of the new one.
Yeah.
Whereas, there's not going to be too much change, and if there is a change, again, you're just going to compare, which I feel is the big issue with certain movies nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, if you were to, if Jurassic World or the Jurassic World movies ended now, after the new one with Scarlett Johansson comes out, because yes, there is supposed to be a new one with Scarlett Johansson. Once that one comes out, if they stop, you wait maybe 25 years. That'd be a good time.
Mm-hmm.
And then released a reboot of Jurassic Park, then
Mm-hmm.
it would be a lot better. Because then there's been enough time for the Jurassic Park movies to serenade. There's now a brand new generation, not just a brand new set, but a brand new generation of people who haven't been exposed to Jurassic Park itself in any way, shape, or form. So it allows them a brand new viewpoint on the series. But time to go to superhero movies, because superhero movies tend to have a different aspect. Because if you notice, in the time that we have lived, we have had not one, not two, not even three, but we have had 4 different Spider-Man series. We have had I want to say 3 different Batmen, soon to be a 4th one with James Gunn.
Yeah.
We have had technically 3 different Hulks.
And Superman, we've
only had 2 Supermen.
Really? Okay.
Well, unless you're counting Smallville. I kind of want to count Smallville. So
yeah.
Well, actually, TV series there's a lot more than that. Because then you've got Tyler Hodgkins and Superman and Lois. Basically, with superhero movies, we have a lot of different interpretations, especially more recently.
Mm-hmm.
Now that everyone's like, oh, hey, multiverse, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
But so, for these superhero movies, the main difference between them and everything else is everything else generally has like just a couple of stories that you can adapt. Comic books have had consistent stories for DC since the 1920s, 1930s, in that timeline. And Marvel has had consistency since the 1960s. Well, Marvel's superheroes since the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you count Captain America. Captain America was World War II era. But, they've had all these different stories throughout the years. And we can't fit every story in, like, a movie trilogy. So, if you revamp it, you can easily remake a film with a brand new villain. And because of how much information for these superheroes is retconned, like, for example, when Spider-Man was originally released, Peter's parents died. You didn't know anything about them, but you knew he grew up with his aunt and uncle. As time went on, you found out that his parents were CIA agents who worked with Wolverine. That was a retcon. And then, as time went on, I know there was some storyline where he found out he had a sister. That was completely retconned. You've got, his entire marriage with Mary Jane retconned because he made a deal with the devil. And that's just prominent ones I could think of. That's not even everything. But these characters have so much lore, they have so many things going on, and they have so many different stories relative to different times that you can release the same superhero in different movies played by different people with different stories, and it would all still make sense. I think the prominent one is Spider-Man, because we have Tobey Maguire, which focuses on him graduating high school, working for the Daily Bugle, battling Green Goblin, Doc Ock, Venom, and Sandman.
And shooting webs through his body.
Yeah. But this also focuses more on his relationship with Mary Jane. Because, in all three of the movies, he has a relationship with Mary Jane Watson.
And in every single one of these, he has a confrontation with her.
Yeah. But there's that. It focuses on Aunt May being basically the wise old lady who gives advice. It focuses on, it focuses on the super side of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Except for his quips. That's the one downside I have to the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man.
Yeah.
There's not enough jokes.
Yeah, not enough jokes, and
then, shortly after the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies ended, we had Andrew Garfield, which did include the quips. And this focused more on the relationship he had with Gwen Stacy. This focused, whereas the other, Tobey Maguire focused more on Spider-Man, as Spider-Man, focusing on him playing the role as Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield's focused more on his duality between his personal life and being a superhero, where everything that he did as a superhero correlated with his life, which did cause the death of Gwen Stacy.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Tom Holland, and now you have a bunch of these different Marvel characters he can interact with rather than just his rogues gallery. Tom Holland. Did I say Tom Holland? No?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Tom Holland focuses on his high school. Yes. It focuses on his relationships with Liz. I guess Liz Toombs, like it's Liz Allen.
Yeah.
And Michelle Jones, who's this version's MJ. But this also focuses on him being a superhero who wants to follow his role models, which are, Captain America, Spider-Man, or he is Spider-Man, Captain America, Iron Man. See, unscripted.
Yeah.
But Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, he wants to follow in those footsteps.
I think unlike the other Spider-Man movies, which kind of covers their origin stories in the first movie, the whole trilogy and the whole storyline is Peter's origin story right there.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And then you have Miles Morales, which is a completely new Spider-Man for the Spider-Verse films.
Yeah.
And this is focusing on becoming the next Spider-Man, as well as the whole multiversal threat.
Yeah, and also figuring out, what does it mean to be Spider-Man?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I will say, I am so upset that Sony is postponing Beyond the Spider-Verse till 2027.
But we'll be looking forward to it.
Oh, easily.
But hey, we at least got Fantastic Four in the meantime to watch.
Yes, got Fantastic Four First Steps with Pedro Pascal and Joseph Quinn. I think that's his name.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the other thing. When it comes to superhero films, because of how many are releasing, sure, people are like, hey, there's a superhero fatigue, but there's so many different stories you can tell. And you can't always get them all with the ideas you come up with. And and with the amount of movies. Like, Venom recently finished his trilogy. I haven't seen the third movie, so I can't really say anything about the third movie. But what I can say is there is so much more to the character of Venom than what has been provided. Because as far as I know, they didn't go through Agent Venom, where he was with Flash Thompson. They didn't go through when he was bonded with Scorpion and actually ate people a lot more. They didn't go with Venom's son. Like Eddie Brock's actual son, who happened to bond with Venom's son. It's complicated. But there's so much to Venom for a character that, for the most part, has been released fairly recently.
Yeah.
And same thing with Harley Quinn. Because we had the new Joker movie, also haven't seen that one. We have, the Harley Quinn TV series with Harley and Poison Ivy, and we have the Suicide Squad films and Birds of Prey with Harley Quinn. All three of them have a different representation of Harley Quinn, but there's so much more to Harley Quinn than just from those. As, and unlike, Spider-Man, who's had several decades. Like, Spider-Man was released in 1964. Or the Fantastic Four, who were released in 1963. Yes, I'm that kind of nerd. Harley Quinn was an original character released in Batman the Animated Series in the 90s. And then, follow up with that, X-23 from the more recent X-Men films, Wolverine, or Logan, and then another film. It's still a little too recent. Sure, everyone knows, but whatever. Anyway, she has been, she was introduced in the early 2000s in the X-Men Evolution series. She has so much more storyline to go off of than what she's already been through. And that's the entire thing. There's so much in comics that you kind of have to remake them semi-regularly to get through everything you can. But going back to the regular, normal book remakes, or Disney remakes, whereas, there's loads of source material for them, there isn't as much source material, so there isn't as much to differentiate. Just get shorter on you. I'm supposed to be a short one in this group. But anyway, I feel like when it comes to those, you have to... It's just like Mike's new car from... I was just thinking. But for remakes, I feel like the best time to remake something is within 25 years.
Yeah.
Because then... Or 25 years of the last released item.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it's been released from long enough so that, this new generation doesn't know. It'll still hold the nostalgia from the older generations.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll revamp the series. Like, I think right now, a perfect series that could get a remake, not saying it should, but could, is Back to the Future. Because the last Back to the Future film was released in,
1991? Yeah, I want to say it's like the early 90s. Yeah, but I think this...
Or maybe it was 87 when it was released.
I don't think so, because Man,
now I gotta check this, too. No, but...
If I'm trying to remember... Because, yeah, but I think that would be a good time to, release something like
1990.
that. Yeah.
And now would be... Or if they got started on the movie now, that'd be great.
Yeah, 30 years, I think it would be a perfect time to release Back to the
It's
Future.
not going to be 30. Oh my God, it is.
Yeah.
I forgot that we're almost 25.
Yeah, it's over 30.
Yeah, but now would be a pretty good time because... You'll have a younger generation who doesn't necessarily know the entirety of Back to the Future. Mm-hmm. You could revamp it to the present day, so now you're going to the past.
Yeah, you could remake it to where it would be this present day, where you could be going back further in time, or you could be coming back way forward in time, because when Back to the Future first came out, when they were talking about the early 2000s, it was much more futuristic than what we're currently living in now. Yes. Even if we are making some futuristic advancements, for better or for worse.
Right. No, I think that would be a good thing to remake. I'm not going to agree with the remake because I feel like Back to the Future is flawless, but I will understand. But that's the other thing. You cannot make just a shot-for-shot remake. You have to have some change. Like Back to the Future has a great way of changing because you can take it into a present day.
Yeah.
You know, I think a great, compares or a great film series that we can't really do that with would be, why can't I think of it? Like The Matrix. I feel like The Matrix should not be getting a film remake at all. I mean, if we continue the story the way we are, I feel like that works, but I don't think there should be a reboot or remake of the Matrix films because there's not too much you can add with the Matrix films.
Yeah.
And even if you could, how much is it actually going to change the story? Mm-hmm. They kind of have them placed into like a block with that.
Yeah. But I think all in all, when it comes to remaking a movie, mm-hmm. and we're just talking movies specifically, and I guess TV shows can fall into that same moniker. Mm-hmm. Try to leave the IP alone for like an extended period of time. Mm-hmm. Maybe could be 20, 25 years, maybe even longer than that.
I mean, if you're going to go with something classic like Frankenstein or Hunchback of Notre Dame, which are based off of books, as long as you introduce something new. To it, like, don't have it where every Frankenstein story is the doctor, brings life into the world and they're the monster. Change it up. Bring in a young Frankenstein where they start singing and dancing to Smoking on the Ritz. Or Putting on the Ritz. But
yeah. When it comes to for movies and TVs is the same. We might come back to this when it comes to, because like of course I mentioned a couple times about remaking a game. Mm-hmm. And that one I think has a little bit of a different set of rules.
Yeah.
Compared to...
I would say remaking a game would have several different rules.
Yeah. I think nowadays, I think some of those rules would be similar to how it is in movies, but in terms of like how they handled it back then, it was completely different because it felt like the hardware was like changing ever more mm-hmm. rapidly. Because like, with movies, you're dealing with like new technology rather than, we're releasing it on a bigger screen and mm-hmm. whatnot. Whereas with a game console, it's a completely different ballpark.
Right.
You're dealing with new sound channels, you're dealing with new software. Mm-hmm. So I think we'll come back to this at a later date. Mm-hmm. But I think, all in all, we're not entirely against remaking properties, but we wish that like, they were done. How do I put this?
Properly.
Yeah, that they were done properly, mm-hmm. or at least put into a certain time where it feels like, it isn't just a cash grab. Even though in most cases it definitely mm-hmm. is.
Or at the very least, make a definite change. Don't make a second Lion King film shot for shot without introducing like maybe a complex relationship between Scar and the hyenas as to why Scar actually employs hyenas. Although
I would see that movie. That'd be cool.
That might be in Mufasa. Might. I don't know. I don't think they'll take that step.
I just forgot that movie's gonna be coming out.
See, that's the kind of movie I would like to see for a remake because it's introducing more to the story. Mm-hmm. It's also why my favorite Lion King movie is Lion King 1.5. Alright. So, with that, anything else you want to add for remakes?
No.
No? Alright. Well, we're going to take a small break, and then after that, we will come back and get started on that. And we're back. Welcome back to Nothing Zilch Nada, where we have nothing in our noggins. We got to find an actual slogan.
We didn't do a slogan at the beginning of this. I just realized that.
We didn't. We just hopped right in. We got to come up with a slogan. That might be something else for next year. But anyway, so now it is our first-ish topic. Because, remakes is a starter topic.
It was a long starter topic.
It was a very long starter topic. But that's good. It means we're improving. So, what I have done, because I can't think of anything right now, I've looked online for a list of friend questions. So we're going to see how well we each know each other. Now, we're not going to do anything too personal, like, we're not going to go...
What's your social security number?
I can't even tell you if I... even if I knew. But anyway, so we're not going to go with anything personal, like middle name, birthday, stuff like that. But we'll go with some, like, seemingly more innocent ones. So let's start off. This first question I feel is innocent enough. Jake, what's my all-time favorite movie? And I know I've mentioned this.
I know you have, but like you've mentioned other ones too.
Yeah, I'm a big movie guy, so
yeah, I know.
So this is where you find out during our break it changed. It didn't, but
okay. So I'm assuming it's not a Marvel movie.
It is not.
Okay.
It is not.
Okay. And it's not a DC movie.
No.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe we should just change this into. You know what? No.
Is it? Wait.
No, hold on. Before you say anything, let's change this into a 21 questions type deal. So you can ask up to 21 questions to help you get your answer.
Okay, so I answered 2.
Yep. So that's just 2.
Okay.
I mean, this is just to pass the time a little more.
Okay. Is it part of a famous IP?
So I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember what IP means. So what?
But basically, is it part of a famous franchise?
No.
Okay. Is it a series?
No.
Okay. Does it have any gimmicks in it? Like, say, time travel or like anything weird?
Not particularly.
Is it a murder mystery?
Sort of. Like, the murder mystery part isn't even... It's not prominent, but there is a little bit of a murder mystery.
Okay.
I know some of these might throw you off with the answers, but I'm trying to answer these as honestly as possible.
Yeah, I know.
Yes, we are still on the call.
Is it based off of a book?
It is based off, well, not a book per se, but it's based off a story.
Okay.
So you're a third of the way there.
That doesn't help. Let's see.
You're asking really good questions.
Yeah, I know, but I haven't really gotten anywhere yet. Because what is a movie that's based on a story?
Well, I think the logical next question... I can't tell you what the logical next question is, but it would involve the story.
No duff.
I mean, like a specific aspect about the story. Something that could easily rule out a lot of people or a lot of things.
What do you mean roll out a lot of people?
Well, rule out a lot of movies. Because so far, all you know, it is not a Marvel or DC film, and it's based off a book. And there's a slight murder mystery in it.
Oh man, this first question honestly is pretty tough. Oh wait. I think I might got it. Frankenstein.
It is not Frankenstein.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, that is my favorite book.
Let's see. I thought it was close. So I'm guessing it's not horror focused.
No, that story is not.
Is it a romance?
No.
Okay. Man.
I'm going to say you had 9 because that one question wasn't necessarily a question. The one about, the one before the romance. What was that one?
Oh man, I can't think about it. Why didn't you tell me? I can't think of it.
You sure?
Yeah.
The Shawshank Redemption. I've mentioned this while we were working.
You know what? That makes sense because
I
have never seen it.
Well, the next step would have been who wrote it. That would have been a lot.
You know what? I don't know why I didn't think about that, but
because then once I mentioned Stephen King, and the fact that it's not a horror, there's only like 3 or 4 movies that Stephen King has released that aren't horror based.
Okay.
All right. So now I gotta guess yours. Is it animated?
Okay, now I have to think about it because I have a lot. I have a lot of favorite movies, but I just
realized that your light up there only has 1 bulb when it needs 3.
Yeah, I know that's been the case for a year. Let's see. I'm trying to think what would be my favorite movie. All
right, say out loud when you have it.
No, shut up. Trying to think. What is one movie that I can watch? Okay. In this case, yes, it is animated.
Okay, this one is animated. Is it DreamWorks?
No.
Is it Disney?
Yes.
Shoot. Just kind of banking on DreamWorks because there's a lot less. Was it released after you were born?
I think so. Now I need to check the release date on it. I'm just going to be turning over here so that way you're not peeked.
I'll look the other way.
I'm pretty sure it was released after I was born, but let me check to make sure I'm right.
I think I know it.
I think you probably know it too. I know I've mentioned it to you before. Let's see. When did it release? Oh, so it actually released the same year I was born, just like 6 months after.
Oh, well, that's not the movie I was thinking of. Because I'm just gonna guess it anyway, just in case. Is it Lilo and Stitch?
No, it's
Okay.
not.
That's what I thought it was.
That is one of my favorite movies, but not this one.
See, that's what I thought it was when you said that, because I'm like, oh, okay, so if it's that close, the only animated Disney film I could think of that came out at that time.
I think Lilo and Stitch.
It was shortly after 9/11 because they had to quickly change it. Because originally they were going to be flying through skyscrapers with a hijacked plane.
Oh, okay.
The more you know. Okay, so that was 1, 2, 4 questions that I have. So now I have. Okay.
So you know it's animated, you know it's Disney, and you know that it came out in 2001.
Did we already talk about it a little bit today?
Maybe.
Is it Treasure Planet?
No.
No. Okay. So it's animated Disney. Wait, hold on. Oh, wait, I'm at 7. Okay. Man. Is it a well-known Disney movie?
In the grand scheme of things, no.
Grand scheme. Did it try to incorporate CGI as well as hand-drawn animation?
Yes.
Okay. Did it involve a lost city?
Yes.
Is it Atlantis?
Yes.
Little House Empire?
Yeah. Yep. That's my favorite movie. It's my family's favorite movie, honestly. That's one of my dad's favorite movies.
Yep.
When it first came out, when it came out on DVD, my dad would always be renting that movie. So for either Christmas or his birthday, my family got him the movie just so that way he could stop renting it.
Nice. I mean, that's the best way.
Yeah.
All right. I picked one question. I'll let you pick one. I think we could each do maybe 3.
Okay. So there's like how many questions? 100?
104.
104. Okay. No.
Like, so let's try to keep our personal lives down to a minimum with that. That way we're not giving away crucial information.
Okay, let's try this one.
Okay.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Oh, I gotta answer yours. Oh. You said 5 years.
Yeah.
For you. Does it involve music?
Yeah. Yeah, some of it does.
Alright. Does it involve teaching?
Hopefully.
Does it involve college?
Well, let's
or
see.
University?
Well, let's see. Well, teaching at a university, yes. Or either that or like a private studio.
Okay, so you're teaching either at a private studio or at a university, specifically teaching music. I think that's why at this point it's just an investigation. Let's keep going. Do you see yourself with a woman?
Maybe.
Do you see yourself with a man? Sorry, I will retract that one.
You already know.
Yeah. Do you see yourself with a pet?
Hopefully.
Is that pet a dog?
Yes.
Okay. Because I know how you feel about cats. Do you see yourself... Do you see yourself performing?
Gigs, yes. In terms of like big areas, I am not sure.
Okay.
One can dream.
do you see this podcast continue to go?
That'll depend on a lot of things.
I know.
Yeah, I think that's a good stopping point.
Okay.
So where do you see yourself in 5 years? Oh, I gotta ask you.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, does it involve teaching?
Yes.
Does it involve cross country?
Yes.
Okay. Does it involve your girlfriend?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it involve living here in this state?
It does.
Okay. Does it involve public school teaching?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see yourself going back to college?
Eventually.
Okay.
I mean, I got another big thing going on in my life that I could include in that 5 years, and you know about it quite a bit.
Oh, this podcast?
I know 2 things. Yeah, I can see the podcast going until then.
Does it involve insert name restaurant?
It does not involve insert name restaurant.
What do I know about it? I'm trying to think what you meant by.
What's the other big part about my life besides schools?
Your family?
And family. Besides those.
Movies? Oh wait. It doesn't involve finishing your movie bucket list.
Not in 5 years, no. It has been 3 years, and I'm halfway done. And there's still movies coming out.
Shoot,
Here, you want a hint?
Yes.
Hey, Jake, your tree's still up. Your tree's still alive. Think about where your tree is. Think about what I call, or what I'm referring to as your tree.
Oh, my. I'm assuming that's not part of the plan.
That tree is not. But there's something else there that is part of the plan.
Okay, now
Okay, where's your tree at?
outside.
Not that one. Did you forget about the tree I'm talking about?
Wait. Why did it? Oh, okay. Yeah, I know. Is it the tree at public?
Yeah, that tree.
Oh my gosh.
It's that tree.
Oh my gosh.
What else is over there that I happen to take part in?
Disc golfing.
Yes. I still plan to disc golf.
Oh my gosh.
So, preface with the tree. We worked for Public Works in our hometown here. And at one of our big parks in town, there's this tree that is so dead that we're not allowed to mow it.
Or mow around it.
Yeah, he hates it. So, because of how often I'm down there, I try to make it a goal to, if I remember and I see the tree, I let him know that it's still up. Just for him.
Screw that tree.
Wow. Harsh. Okay, so Let me go through.
Yeah, some of those questions are too obvious, though.
Some of them are, and then some of them are like, who knows me better? And some of them are pick and choose. Okay, so this question sucks for me.
Okay.
I'm not going to ask this question as the actual question.
Okay.
Because it's, without looking at my page, what's the last thing I posted on Instagram? I have a tough time keeping track.
I don't think you've ever posted.
I haven't posted a single thing
on Instagram.
I have one, I just haven't posted it. Okay. Let's see. Okay, we've actually discussed this a little bit.
Okay.
Over the summer.
Okay.
So if I were a superhero, what would be my superpower?
Yeah, we've definitely talked about this before. Let's see. I
hear the police.
I wanted to say it's.
Sorry, I gotta be a superhero. Give me a sec.
I wanted to say it was something similar to like Charles Xavier.
Crap, now I gotta think. Initially it was. For the sake of it, I'm gonna say yes.
Okay, now I'm trying to remember exactly what I had in mind when we had that discussion. What? I know it was a little bit specific.
It was very specific.
I'm
trying to remember what it was. Because I'm pretty sure we spent 5 minutes discussing yours.
I think it was. I felt like it had something to do with like the mind.
Maybe it did. All right, hold on. Maybe not. Yeah, I'll look at a different question. Wow, these are like... Ooh. Okay. I'm going to save that for the future. There is a question asking if I could time travel, would I time travel to the past or the future? That would be a great topic in general just to talk about.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh. Embarrassing, who knows me better. Alright. Let's just do a few of these. We're not going to do these as 21 questions, but...
Okay.
We'll start with... I mean, these ones are embarrassing, so... I'm going to try and keep them as...
Okay.
So, we'll start with, have I ever broken a bone? What do you think? For me.
Yes, you have. I remember. It was senior year of high school.
That was not a broken bone.
Oh.
That was a sprain. I sprained my foot because I ran too much.
Okay. So I guess I don't know.
I mean, the answer is still yes.
Yeah.
When I was in kindergarten, I broke my wrist.
Okay.
And then much more recently, last Tuesday, I broke my little toe. Which, by the way, there's nothing to do about broken toes. Which is why you don't see any boots.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I keep elbowing your bed.
No, that's okay.
Okay, and then for you, do I I feel like you've broken a bone before.
You want to know something?
What?
I've never broken a bone.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
Alright, well, allow me to be the first.
Okay. I think the closest I've had to an injury was like I chipped a tooth before from falling off my bike, but
It's not an injury. It's just a chipped tooth.
it hurt pretty bad, and I had a bunch of scrapes.
So does a broken toe. Alright. Have I ever had braces?
I want to say no. I don't remember you having braces.
I have not had braces. I've been told I should because I have that gap in my teeth.
Yeah.
But I do not have braces. And I don't think you've had braces either.
True. So this is interesting. I think both of my sisters have braces, and my brother and I never need to have braces. And like my teeth are just fine. You know, my teeth aren't really crooked in any way.
What songs do I like to sing in the shower?
Okay, I think I know this one. So, the anything that's by like the obscurest finals or untraceable records.
I wish that was the answer. I wish that was the answer. You know what? I'm gonna make that the answer next time I shower.
What was the actual answer?
So, I mean, the obvious one is Umbrella by Rihanna.
Okay.
But I also do the Tom Holland dances to it. You know, from the lip sync. But I tend to sing... When I sing in the shower, I tend to sing songs I want to try for karaoke. So, more recently, it's been I Want It That Way by the Backstreet Boys.
Okay.
I actually have a list. Hold on, give me a second. Can I go to my Spotify for this? Because I have a... There's I Want It That Way by the Backstreet Boys. There's the Survivor I Will Survive mashup from Glee.
Yeah.
Old Time Rock and Roll by Bob Seger.
Okay.
Welcome to the Black Parade by My Chemical Romance.
Okay.
And Backwards by Rascal Flatts.
Yeah.
You know, the song that asks you, you know, what you get when you play a country song backwards. You know, you get your house back, your wife back, best friend Jack back.
Yeah, I still like to imagine you like in the shower saying, "Take it, dump it to the sink, face it, it's an art installation."
Yes.
Okay.
All right, and for you, I'm trying to think if you would sing in the shower. I feel like as a music major you should because bathrooms have good acoustics.
I mean, I do sing in general, you know, whenever I transcribe something.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm learning, you know, jazz vocal charts, you know, of course I'm singing those. But of course, I sing the other stuff as well.
You sing Firework in the shower.
I have not listened to that song in a long time.
Let's probably bring this back up with the questions.
I can tell you what I've been singing last night when I was in the shower. It was Irish folk tunes.
Okay. Alright. What is my worst subject in school?
Oh, man.
That's rough.
That is rough. I think that'd be hard for both of us to guess. I'm trying to think if you've ever mentioned something like that before. I know, well, let's eliminate the obvious ones. I know it's not band. I know it's not cross country, although those are more like extra activities, I guess. I know for sure it's not math or any science related stuff.
No.
And it's not. Let's see. Well, okay. Are they talking about worse in terms of an academic theme?
I would assume worse.
Okay. Okay. I can't think of it.
My worst subject is child growth and development psychology.
Okay.
Alright, and for you, I feel like yours is English for some reason.
See, this is tough because I would say at the beginning it probably was. Nowadays, no. With how many papers I write,
Right.
I still have trouble with like grammatical errors and
I mean, it
talking and whatnot. But like,
Mhm.
I say my what was my worst subject? I think my worst subject for me was I'm trying to think. I think my worst subject was probably math.
Mm.
And now I should preface this by saying like I could do basic math equations and I can even do like some of the complex ones if I just like remembered like how to do the exact formulas and whatnot.
What's 2 plus 2?
Shut up.
Okay. What's 4 plus 4?
I feel like you're going to somewhere. Wait, no. This is the math tree.
Mm-hmm. So what's 4 plus 4?
8.
8 plus 8?
16.
16 plus 16?
32.
32 divided by 2?
16. I know
Okay.
the basic math equations, but here's the thing. You mentioned English. The math problems I usually struggled with were the story problems.
Yeah. That's a lot of everyone's struggles.
Yeah,
The
but
problem
it was my struggle in particular. It's hard for me to think of formulas.
I feel like part of it is also, when you're trying to break down the problem, all the words are kind of mushing in with it. Yeah. Alright, hold on. Let's get one more and then we can move on to the last one. So one of the questions is, did I play an instrument?
Yes, you did.
We kind of know that one.
Yeah, we know that one.
Alright. When did I learn to ride a bike?
4?
No.
5?
No.
3?
No.
1?
No.
2?
No.
6?
No.
7?
I'm just gonna stop you right there. Yes, I know how to ride a bike, but I didn't actually ride bikes until I was closer to 19, 20. And I still don't ride bikes often enough to even say that I know how to ride a bike.
That is interesting.
I fall off every time. And for you, I'm going to say 4.
Yeah, I want to say that's around there.
Yes. Well, that was short. I was thinking this was going to be more fun, but I think it was a little fun.
Yeah, it's a little fun. Maybe, I don't know, I guess we haven't gotten to any like serious subjects or anything, but like, it did give us a couple brain teasers though.
It did.
Yeah.
And we learned a little bit about each other.
Yeah, not riding a bike until you're 19. Wow.
To be fair, my roads on my street are brick, so those aren't necessarily the best for riding a bike. Plus, we have a small street.
Yeah.
Alright, so, want to get started with yours after we take another quick small break?
Yeah, this one will be a doozy.
Alright, so when we're back from our break, we will, once we're back from our break, we will continue. We're back one more time for one more subject, and Jake, this one's to you.
Alright, so, throughout history, almost since like the beginning of time, we have been familiar and have dealt with the concept of a war. Any type of war, throughout history, no matter the country, even right now, we're experiencing some types of wars.
Yeah.
And you know.
Like the war of whether or not I should wear pants or shorts. It's actually not that cold outside.
Okay.
I mean, it's 37, but it's not that cold.
I will agree with you there. But yeah, but these types of wars, we're always talking about like how dreadful some of them are. Even right now, we still remember them. Mm-hmm. But no matter what type of war we're dealing with, there's always one type of war that any one of us can be a part of and still have a good time with. Console wars.
Console wars.
Okay, so console wars are actually not as prevalent as they used to be. I mean, I guess there is console wars, but like right now it's just kind of no one really cares about console wars anymore.
There's still some stuff about console.
Yeah, there is some stuff. I mean, if you were to take a look at the current competitors right now in like the big three console headers, that is Nintendo Switch, got the PlayStation 5, you got the Xbox Series X.
I would include, I think PlayStation, their big one right now isn't the PS5. I think it's that new headset that they have.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about current consoles that are competing against each other right now in a particular era. So, like, for example, like say the console generation when we were first born, which is like the PlayStation 2, the Dreamcast, the GameCube, and the Xbox, they were all competing with each other. Now, the Dreamcast is kind of a slight exception to this rule because it came out in 98 in Japan, but discontinued in 2001, the same year the GameCube and the Xbox released. And by the time 1999 came around, the PlayStation 2... Actually, no, in 2000, when it first released, the PlayStation 2 sort of killed off the Dreamcast. And we're actually going to be talking about that for a bit. Okay. Well, not for a bit, but like later on, because there is one... Because, like, no matter what, I think that there are two particular... matches of like console wars that people seem to talk about. One of them is the PlayStation 3 versus the Xbox 360.
Okay.
And we're not counting the Wii because the Wii was a runaway success and they could beat the popularity of the Wii. But the other one, which is one we're going to be talking about, is the Super Nintendo versus the Sega Genesis.
Right.
Now, both of us were not alive when this that particular console war was active. So, I want to say if we're talking about the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo side by side, their console war sort of started in 1990. If we're talking about when Nintendo, because like the Sega Genesis, also known as the Mega Drive in other territories, released in 88 in Japan.
Okay.
And it was trying to compete against the Famicom at that time. But Nintendo was already making their next generation console, which would be the Super Famicom, also known as the Super Nintendo in other territories. But Super Famicom would release in 1990 in Japan, and then 91 in America. And I think the Sega Genesis, I'll have to look into this, but I think the Sega Genesis, when it came out to America, I think it was 1990, maybe 1989 when it released in America. But no matter what way you were slicing it, these were two pieces of hardware from two companies that were competing against each other, and this was the first time where Nintendo actually had a threat to the console race. But in order to get into that, we should probably talk about talk about a little bit about both of the companies and get like a brief summary of each and how they started out. So maybe just to ask you first, what do you know about Nintendo and Sega?
I know specifically when my parents were children, they were the two biggest gaming companies. One of them, Nintendo, had Mario as their spokesperson, and one of them, Sega, had Sonic. And I know that Sega's consoles kind of died out sometime between now and then.
Yeah. Well, so I'm gonna be explaining their origin stories, and their origin stories is very interesting. Now, honestly, specifically with Nintendo, this could be like a whole discussion to a podcast in and of itself. But I'm gonna make a brief summary. So, out of the big three console makers that are still around today, Nintendo is the only one that they just do games. They're not like Sony where they make other pieces of hardware. They're not Microsoft where they also do computers and whatnot. They just do games.
Yeah.
But that was not how they started out as. So Nintendo, and I'm trying to look into this a little bit. So Nintendo originally, let's see. Sorry if this is taking me a little bit. So Nintendo first started off as a store in Kyoto, Japan, and it was made by a businessman by Fusajiro Yamauchi. Now the Yamauchi name, that name would carry on into Nintendo as they continue on with like their presidents up until the early 2000s. Although one thing I should know about the Yamauchi family is that it's family related, but it's not blood related.
Okay.
When they passed on like certain presidential roles. And Nintendo, I'm trying to see when they first opened up, because like we're talking, I think it was around 1889 when they first opened their first store in Kyoto, Japan. And the first thing that they did was they made Hanafuda cards. That was the first thing that they made. Now, Hanafuda cards, if you don't know, are smaller than normal trading cards, and they're made of plastic, and they featured artwork rather than numbers or shapes because gambling was a big problem in Japan.
All right, so I did look it up. Nintendo's first store opened in September 23rd, 1889.
Yeah, right there.
In Kyoto.
Yep. So they started out making Hanafuda cards, but as they continued on, they realized that making cards for the company wasn't going to help them in the long run. So they started to experiment with different adventures, like different pieces of hardware. They made vacuum cleaners. They even did love hotels. What is a love hotel? Look it up.
Wow. Leaving everyone in suspense with the love hotels. All right.
Do your research.
Hey, kids, all you have to do is ask mommy and daddy. Don't actually ask them. Also, don't say that the two guys on the internet who are just talking about it said that you could ask them.
But it feels weird to say it though, that like, yes, Nintendo, who tries to be like this family-friendly company in terms of America, they did stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
well,
but here's the thing.
You do have Mario and his pipes.
Shut up. Mario wasn't even a thing yet. But either way, those ventures bombed. They bombed extremely hard, and that was...
I mean, if they opened him up in the present day, I'm sure it would work out well.
Anyways, so they moved on. They wanted to try something else, and they started making toys. And the specific person that came up with the idea was a man by the name of Gunpei Yokoi, who we'll probably get more into in a different episode of the podcast. But he was a key figure in Nintendo, both in terms of like the toy market and when they eventually got into gaming. Because after their toy venture, they eventually got into video games with the Game & Watch type of handhelds. And then their first sort of console was like something called the Color TV. And I'm not exactly sure. It wasn't like a cartridge-based system, and in fact, I think you could only play like a few basic games on there. But then they also got into like arcade games as well, you know, with releases by Donkey Kong, which was created by Shigeru Miyamoto. There was Punch-Out as well, because Punch-Out was a arcade game before it was an NES game. But that translated over to Nintendo's first home console, which would release in 1983, which is the family computer, shortened as the Famicom. And then it would later release in 1985 as the Nintendo Entertainment System. But to segue to the next company we're talking about, an interesting thing about the Famicom is that it released the same day as Sega's first home console, the SG-1000. So let's switch over to Sega. Now, Sega nowadays is a Japanese-based company.
I was gonna ask if they're still going, but considering we're still getting Sonic games.
Yeah, no, they still exist. They just don't make consoles anymore. They don't make software. They just publish and make games and whatnot. But they're a Japanese-based company that also has like an office in the U.S., much like Sony, much like Nintendo. Because like, you know, there's Nintendo of Japan, Nintendo of America, and whatnot.
Right.
But what you probably don't know is that it was actually first based in America before it transferred offices into Japan. And specifically Honolulu, Hawaii. Yeah, but no, I'm trying to find exactly.
See, he actually does research. I'm just trying to do things by memory. And fact check myself later. He's doing the better thing.
Yeah. So actually, this is another thing to point out. They were not called Sega at first. They were called Service Games, and they made slot machines for U.S. military bases around that time. And they were first developed in the 1960s.
Slot machines for the military?
Yeah.
All right, gotta get my rations.
Yeah, but after doing slot machines, they started making electromechanical games like Periscope and Helicopter and whatnot. Periscope especially, that was their first big hit. But then after a while, they transferred over to Japan, and they merged with another company called Rosen Enterprises, and from there, they officially changed their name to Sega. And the thing to realize about that name, you take the first, so they were called Service Games, right? You take the first two letters of service, take the first two letters of games, you get Sega. Yeah. So then by the 70s, they were making arcade games, and eventually that translated over to video games. And yes, their very first game console was the SG-1000. Now, you probably never heard of this system because it was never released outside of America. it didn't even have that long of a lifespan. It only lasted, I think, for 2 or 3 years. It had like a couple of different models, but it didn't last as long. Um, One interesting thing to know, so Sega and Nintendo's like rivaling nature for each other was more prominent in like the 90s. It was from the start, right from the beginning when they started making consoles. Again, they released those two consoles on the same day. Um, but the difference was what happened in the long run, because Sega actually beat out Nintendo in terms of initial sales at first, because Nintendo had a problem when it came to like chip shortages and whatnot for their consoles. So the SG-1000 beat out the Famicom at first, but in the long run, the Famicom ended up lasting way longer.
Okay.
And then going on from there, in I think it was it was 1985 when Sega released the Sega Mark III, also known as the Master System, in other territories. Now, this system would release in America, but by that time, Nintendo already launched the Nintendo Entertainment System, the American version of the Famicom, to America and other territories, and it was getting prominence because it had a great software library of games, and I think that was the one thing that made Nintendo have a much stronger relevance even now, was like the stuff that came out of Nintendo for the most part was pretty high in quality. They also had better third-party support. Nintendo back then had a lot of third-party support, and it was hard for Sega to get into that. Mostly because Nintendo was trying to like hold on to the third parties. It was like a contractual thing, because there was the video game crash in 1983,
right,
and that put Nintendo felt like they had to have some quality control after Atari screwed up everything and everyone started to get into the gaming market, and there was no quality control.
Right.
But the Master System, while not selling as well as like the Famicom and Entertainment System, it still has some relevance, because like Phantasy Star, an RPG series, started on the Master System, and Sega did have a mascot. In the 80s, Alex Kidd was their mascot platformer.
Why does Alex Kidd sound familiar? I mean, I probably know. I played Sega also Racing Transformed. I don't remember who he looks like.
Yeah, well, Alex Kidd was intended to be like their mascot character, but not to the extent of what Mario was. So again, the Master System only lasted 3 or 4 years in its initial span. Now, the Master System actually, it's still around. It's a very easy system to emulate, and it actually is still prevalent in PAL territories, specifically Brazil.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they just love the Master System. But again, shut up.
Don't keep going. I'm trying not to say it.
So now we transfer over to like when Sega released the Mega Drive or the Sega Genesis in other territories, and now they're trying to get back on their feet. Again, it was really hard to match to the same quality as Nintendo. Sure, they had powerful hardware at that time, but there were also other competitors as well, because like beforehand, NEC Corporation they released the PC engine with Hudson, which would become the TurboGrafx 16, and that was like another 16-bit console. It was a little bit more popular in Japan, but in America it was not as popular. But Sega, when they released the Genesis, it was released at the same time as Nintendo releasing Super Mario Brothers 3 in Japan.
Ooh.
And that was in '88 as well.
And so the rivalry begins.
Yeah. Well, there had always been a rivalry, but at that point, by that time, Nintendo was just like kicking everyone out. You know, they were being Atari, they were being Sega, they were being like all their different competitors, and you know, the Famicom. Excuse me.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. Just a slight hiccup.
Okay.
But Nintendo knew even before getting into the 90s that like they needed to change. You know, they couldn't stick to like the same hardware, and that was when the Super Nintendo was coming in. In fact, Super Mario Brothers 3, part of the reason it was made was just so that way it could hold over the release of the Super Nintendo, because also around the same time they were making another sequel to that game, Super Mario Brothers 4, which would release a Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo. And I guess now we'll talk about just the beginnings of like their rivalries and how they were able to like be sort of neck and neck with each other a little bit. So I want to say, let's see. So at first, Sega positioned the Genesis, the Mega Drive, as like this game where like, oh, you could play arcade quality games, because by that time, you know, arcade games were becoming a lot more powerful. They were showing a lot more graphics and whatnot, and the Genesis was capable of doing that. But the thing is, though, I don't think that's what most people want in a home console. Because, like, an arcade game is different from, like, a home console game. Because, like, an arcade game, it's usually score-based stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And that is evident in terms of the marketing for Sega in America in particular. Also in the launch title, too. So, you take a look at Sega and some of the stuff that they were releasing. Again, some of the stuff was in America, but there was stuff like Joe Montana football and Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. They were trying to get celebrities in their games because they were positioning the Genesis as this console for teenagers to get into. And it's also evident in the packing game that Sega initially had for the Genesis, which was Altered Beast, which was an arcade game and not a very good one. It was not a very good game in the arcades, but it especially did not fit in home consoles. But because of that, the Genesis had some traction, but not a lot of it.
Right.
But that was until Tom Kalinske came over, and he was president of Sega in America, and he's actually a big figure because he revitalized the Barbie franchises and Hot Wheels.
Nice. Oh, he's the Mattel guy.
Yeah, he worked for Mattel. But he felt like he could do the same thing for video games as well. And one of the things that he did was he changed the price of the Genesis from $199 to $149.
Oh.
And instead of Altered Beast being the packet title, have Sonic be the packet title. And that was when Sega was gaining traction. And beforehand, they had some campaigns as well where it's like Genesis does when Nintendo don't. Which was a pretty aggressive marketing campaign. It was pretty good.
I think I remember seeing a couple of commercials for that.
Yeah, and then there were other ones too, like afterwards, once Sonic came out, they talk about this whole thing about blast processing, how it was faster than like the Super Nintendo, which that was debatable. But it helped. And Nintendo had to catch up on that. Again, they sort of came in late when it came to launching like a 16-bit console.
Right.
You know, they weren't the only kid on the block anymore. They had, in both Japan and America, a real competitor to deal with. So the Famicom released in 90, and they released it as the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in 91. And initially, in Japan, they had two games, and that was Super Mario World and F-Zero. But by then, the Genesis already had a great amount of games.
Right.
In fact, I need to look up real quick of like how many games were there were in total for the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. At least stuff that was published or is official.
Right.
If this will load. Again, Nintendo, they were having success with their previous console. You know, the Sega, not the Sega Genesis, with the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Famicom, but by then they needed to upgrade. And during that time, the concept of upgrading a game console was not prevalent to people outside of Japan. So like in America in particular, you know, there were parents complaining about the fact that, oh, I have to buy a new game console now when I already invested in the Nintendo Entertainment System and whatnot.
Right.
Which was fair, you know. But Nintendo needed to keep up with reasons as to why they had to be up on the top.
Right. Sorry, I'm looking at the more stories like this, and it says that Pokemon weddings are now a thing.
I think they've been a thing.
Pretty sure they've been a thing. I mean, if it's a fandom, I'm sure there's a wedding based around that.
Yeah, but I guess since talking about these consoles, they had differences with each other in terms of look and designs and controllers. The Super Nintendo had a much more ergonomic design. It didn't feel outdated. It was the first one to include shoulder buttons on the controllers.
Ooh.
And
I like those shoulder buttons.
Yeah, and also the button layout for like, you know, the four buttons, the four circle buttons. That same layout is still used in a lot of modern controllers today. Meanwhile, the Sega Genesis had less buttons. It had only like 3 face buttons and didn't have shoulder buttons. I think it only had, the initial controller had 5 buttons in total, which was fine. But then once you started getting into like arcade games like Street Fighter, porting those over, that's when you needed more buttons. And there were so many Sega Genesis controllers they released with so many different layouts and button designs. It's insane. I'm pretty sure there's a website where they showed like all the different like controllers and button layouts and whatnot.
Okay.
But yeah, and you know, graphics, some of them were different. There are debates of like, you know, certain ports.
You have been blocked. fine.
I am trying to get this up. So I'm looking up. Gotta be kidding me.
Did you just get kicked out?
Yeah, it happens.
How does it happen?
It just does, okay?
Huh.
There we go. Okay, so Sega Genesis would, by the time that console ended, it had a number of 879 titles in its library. Which I believe is it's definitely more than the SG-1000, which I know has like 50 games, and the Master System, which has less than that, unless you wanted to count all those different ROMs that's been released in Brazil and whatnot. Now I'm trying to look at the Super Nintendo because I think I'm pretty sure it might be more. Might be about the same. Yeah, 1,738 official releases. And all of them are kind of split between like different regions because of course there's Japanese exclusives, even European exclusives at some point. Not to say that Genesis didn't have those, but it was more prevalent in Nintendo. So actually, since we're talking about exclusives, maybe this is where we talk about like, you know, some of the exclusive stuff that they both had,
right?
Or at least some of their quote unquote best games. So Genesis did not have Sonic at first.
Really?
Yeah. Again, they wanted to position themselves as like, oh, home console where you could play arcade games. Again, it released in '88, and their launch title was Altered Beast. Their packet title was Altered Beast. It wasn't until the 90s, the early 90s, 1990 specifically, that they would create stuff like Sonic the Hedgehog, which was a runaway success, and it's one of the reasons why the Genesis gained so much more prominence. And it gave Sega an actual mascot for once, because Alex Kidd was not doing them justice. Unfortunate to the demise of Alex Kidd.
He's in the river, swimming with the fishes.
Yeah. So you had Sonic versus Mario, and while the first Sonic game is debatable of whether it's like an actual good game or not, I think it's just all right. It didn't really matter. It came packed in with the Genesis, and it was able to establish a new franchise. Because afterwards we got Sonic 2, which was a really great game, and Sonic 3 and Knuckles, which is another really great game. But there's more to the Genesis library than the Sonic games. And in terms of some of the mainstay stuff that was on Sega Genesis, the stuff that came later on, there was the Phantasy Star games. Phantasy Star continued on that console, and so did Alex Kidd. Alex Kidd got a game on the Genesis, maybe even gotten two. But there was the Street of Rage, which were beat 'em ups, and it had 3 entries, all of which were there's a debate of which one is better, but all 3 of them have real great staying power. There was even like exclusive stuff from well-established franchises, like Castlevania Bloodlines was one of the great exclusive stuff from the Genesis. Contra War Corps, not War Corps. Rogue Corps is the name of the game. So Konami supported that console, but in fact, Konami actually did pull out another IP for the Genesis, Gunstar Heroes, which is, I think it's like Gunstar Heroes and Rocket Knight Adventures. Might be. I don't know if Gunstar Heroes, if that's like a Sega IP or a Konami one, but either way, yeah. So Rocket Knight Adventures, that was by Konami, and let's see, Golden Axe, that was another arcade game.
Castlevania Bloodlines.
Yeah, there was
the Dolphin.
Echo the Dolphin.
Or wait, was that Echo?
Yeah,
it looked like the Dolphin.
Nope, it's Echo the Dolphin. Echo the Dolphin was another prominent game in Sega's catalog. Vector Man, that was competing against Nintendo with its like polygonal graphics. Earthworm Jim. Comic Zone, that's another great game. Although that came in '95, which was towards the Genesis's end life in North America. But there was one other game that the Mortal Kombat games on Genesis were considered to be like the best ways to play Mortal Kombat because they also released on Super Nintendo, and those are typically not as great on Super Nintendo. Let's see, I'm trying to find where else it's on there. Shining Force, another great. Shinobi, the Shinobi games I've heard are pretty great as well. So they had great games, and even some like really great exclusives as well. But that wouldn't help them in the long run. Let's see. So Gunstar Heroes. Okay, so I don't think it was made by Konami. I think it was made by Sega. Still a really great game though. One of the best in the Genesis's library. But when you compare that to what Nintendo was getting, I'm just gonna use this over here. I mean, you had Super Mario World as the launch title for both Japan and North America. In fact, in North America, it was a package title. And sure, it may have not have been the fast platforming like Mario, like Sonic was, but it was evolutionary rather than revolutionary when it came to the Mario franchise. Now, it wasn't the best demonstrator when it came to like new hardware, because the Super Nintendo's thing was like, oh, it could do Mode 7 and scaling backgrounds and rotating sprites and whatnot. And Super Mario World didn't show that. The other launch titles did. Like F-Zero, which was a new Nintendo IP.
Okay.
The fast speed racing. That showcased Mode 7. Pilot Wings, also made by Nintendo. Great showcase of Mode 7 as well.
Nice.
But then you got some of the other exclusive Nintendo IPs as well. Even some new franchises, like The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, which was a great evolution from like the original Zelda game, and it's considered to be like one of the best Zelda games out there. You had, let's see. I'm purposely skipping some of these because I know I'm going to be talking about them later. But I'm trying to think. There were Kirby games on the Super Nintendo. Superstar in particular was pretty good. Super Metroid was a great evolution of like the first Metroid game on like the NES, and again, it's considered to be one of the best games ever made. A lot of these Super Nintendo games are considered to be the best games ever made in their franchises. You got Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island, which was the start of like the Yoshi Island series of games, which were platformers, but they played differently. I'm trying to think specifically. Let's see. There was Earthbound. That was a new RPG made by Nintendo. Actually started out in the Famicom. It's actually called the Mother series. Star Fox is another great game.
Do a barrel roll.
Yeah, that was before the 64 game, though. This was the first Star Fox game, which is a little bit rough today, but, you know, it was a good graphical showcase back then that showed, like, 3D graphics.
Okay.
Which we will definitely be touching up on that subject a little bit, but, you know, even if the Sega had like some third-party support, I don't think it's as strong as what Nintendo had, because by then Nintendo already had some established third-party support from like their previous console, because you had Capcom, you had Square, you had Enix, you had Konami, and while some of them did develop some stuff for Genesis, again, Konami, they did some stuff. I think Capcom did like a couple of different stuff too. Again, it pales in comparison to what Nintendo had. Going over Capcom first, you had Mega Man X, which was a great evolution of the original Mega Man games. You had Street Fighter, which was an arcade game, but the Super Nintendo entries are beyond the most popular ones.
Right.
Even if the Genesis did have a version of Street Fighter 2 that was in the arcades, but but Street Fighter 2 I think sold better on the Super Nintendo. It's definitely like one of the top best-selling titles on that console. Speaking of top sellers, Super Mario Kart. The start of like the Mario Kart series. Let's see. Going over other third-party developers, you had Konami with Super Castlevania 4. What is it? I'm trying to think of the exact name of. It's Contra 3: The Alien Wars was that game. And there was also, I think there was other Konami games on that system.
Right.
Oh, there was Gradius. That was like a launch title. More of an arcade game, but like still pretty good on Super Nintendo. Let's see. But then you got Square. I think of the Super Nintendo as like the one of the game consoles that had great RPG support. Like you had the Final Fantasy series, you got Secret of Mana, you got Chrono Trigger, you got you even got some of the stuff that never released outside of Japan, like Romancing Saga or Bahamut Lagoon. That's like a very obscure title. They made Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars.
Oh.
That was like their first project that they collaborated with Nintendo for. Also was their last one. Jeez. I'm trying to remember. Enix, they had stuff like ActRaiser and Illusion of Gaia, other RPGs. Terranigma, which never released in America, is another phenomenal, great RPG. Yeah, so they beat them out in terms of library by the end, but they were still like kind of neck and neck with each other. But I guess we should talk about like how one was able to beat out the other. And I'm gonna look at the console sales lists real quick, because you can argue all day about which console was the best in terms of hardware or what had the best. had the best games, had the best hardware, and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, though, Nintendo beat it out.
Right.
Sega. Because, like, I'm trying to see. Because, like, yeah, so by the end, the Super Nintendo got 49.1 million units.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, like, that's not a lot in terms of today, but, like, it's still, like, a pretty good number at that time. But the Sega Genesis, I'm trying to see. There it is. 30.75 million.
Oh.
And which was like a bit of a distant second place.
Right.
Although not as distant as the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
But we should talk about why. Because as great as Sega was doing in terms of their hardware, in terms of their home console, there was this pressure to upgrade it.
Right.
And I think one thing we should know about Sega America and Sega Japan, they were always conflicting with each other. Because Sega Japan felt like, oh, we need to upgrade to like the next best thing and whatnot. And then Kalinsky in America was like, no, like the Genesis is doing fine. You know,
right.
But then that's when they started introducing the add-ons to the Genesis, because there was the Sega CD, and then later on they introduced the 32X, which was launched alongside the new Sega console, the Sega Saturn, which was very poor timing in more ways than one. Yeah, so those add-ons, like, killed the Genesis because, like, they were nothing... It wasn't even the fact that they really upgraded the hardware. They did, but, like, you had to buy separate games for those add-ons.
Right.
Like, you had to play Sega CD games on your Sega CD. You had to play 32X games on your 32X. Sometimes you needed both the 32X and the CD for a couple of different games. And they were also very rushed, very underdeveloped. The games that were released on those add-ons were not great. But there was one game in particular that kind of killed off both of those add-ons. Because the one thing that made Nintendo different was that they did not upgrade their console by doing add-ons. Instead... Well, now Nintendo has done add-ons for their consoles before, but instead they made the smart decision of like upgrading their cartridges to improve the graphics instead. And there was one game in particular that killed off Sega's add-ons, Donkey Kong Country, made by Rare, which you didn't need a 32X, you didn't need a CD. Those graphics looked great. They still look great today.
Right.
But it killed off. It really did kill off Sega. The other thing that killed off Sega was the Sony PlayStation. It was Sony's first foray into the console market, and they nailed it, to put it in very soft.
They nailed it into Sega's coffin.
Yeah. The start of Sega's coffin.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So when Sega Saturn was released in North America, they rushed the release, and they announced on E3 that like, oh, the Sega Saturn is out now. Retailers were not happy about that. And because of that, the games were very underdeveloped. They were rushed. They did not look as polished. They didn't get enough time for proper development as they should. And by the time they were able to figure out the system go, the Sony PlayStation was already out running and getting sequels to exclusive games. And then Nintendo wasn't faring off better either, but like they weren't doing as bad as Sega was, because even when they were doing poorly in terms of the home console market, they were still dominating in terms of the handheld market.
Right.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, Nintendo really killed off Sega.
Yeah.
Or at least was the first to kill off Sega. So what do you think?
Personally, I think that is a lot of information that I may need to rewatch just to try to retain all of it. But I do find this history fascinating. Like you asked me earlier, what did I know about Nintendo and Sega before now? And they were game consoles, and Sega kind of died off while Nintendo kept going.
Yeah.
And now I know a lot more.
Yeah. Now Sega, they would stop making home consoles in 2001. Their last home console was the Dreamcast, which was it was a fine system, but the PlayStation 2 really killed it off. In fact, it wasn't even the release, the announcement of the PlayStation 2, which was already succeeding the high sales of like the PlayStation 1.
Mm-hmm.
And like the PlayStation 2 is one of like the best-selling consoles, although I don't think it would be the case for long, because I think the Nintendo Switch is beating it out.
Right. I don't know, I haven't really heard much news about the Nintendo Switch recently. Like, I'm still hearing things about PlayStation. I'm hearing a couple things about Xbox. I barely hear anything about it.
Trust me, Nintendo Switch is selling.
Alright.
It is definitely top 5, I will tell you that.
Well, I mean, we haven't had a new Nintendo system in, 6 years?
That's probably a good thing. Because when they released the Nintendo Switch, it was 4 years after the Wii U, which was not doing well in terms of sales.
Right.
They released the Switch just so that way they could kill off the Wii U early.
Mm-hmm.
Because they knew they couldn't do it in the long run, which ended up being the best decision that they made. And I think it's paid off tremendously with the great library of games that they've been releasing and re-releasing.
Right.
But I definitely do want to talk about like Nintendo and Sony and their competitive nature for another day.
Right.
But this actually went way longer than I expected. But
right. All right. Well, any other things you like to say about this current rivalry?
Certainly isn't what it used to be, but I don't think most people care anymore.
Right.
But back in the day, people were always like, "Oh, my console has the better games," or "My console has the better graphics." People really don't care anymore.
Not really.
I think it's just you have your personal preferences and you stick to it. For me, it's always been Nintendo consoles. They may not always be the best, but they usually have some pretty good games on there.
Right. All right. Well, with that, I think this wraps up our. I'm trying to remember which episode this is.
This is episode 5 or 6. I know the Halloween special was entitled. So.
All right. So I'm pretty sure this is 5.
Yeah, episode 5.
Yep. And don't worry, we'll be back next week, not a month from now. Well, with that, I'm Xavier.
And I'm Jake.
And we'll see you next time.